Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Political Soup podcast. My name is John Toll and I am the host of the show, although that's probably too generous of a term because the stars of the show are the people I'm going to introduce in a second, which is our cast of political geniuses, I like to call them. On the show we talk about today's hot political topics, everything from Nancy Pelosi's wig to, somebody's ugly face, I don't know. Anyway, Paul, let's talk about you for a second. Paul is our resident libertarian. And Paul, yeah,
Actually,
I know, you're not libertarian. You prefer the term liberal. So I'll meet you halfway and call you a classical liberal. How about that?
that'll work.
Okay, that good. Paul's main focus is on freedom, although he does lean slightly to the right on many issues, although his background doesn't quite match up today. What's up with that, Paul?
Hey, it's Halloween, and you gotta decorate for what's scary.
Very nice.
Nothing more scary.
All right. Well, let's talk to Danon Bugh. Danon represents the right side of the political curve, although I don't think I would go as far as calling him right wing. He's a big fan of Obama's, just like Paul. Kidding, man. So why
Just
don't
like Paul.
yeah, just like Paul. So Danon, where would you say? I mean, you just straight up classic right side of the fence. Do you have a label for
Yeah.
yourself?
I'd say it's fair to call me right wing. I'm conservative.
Okay.
You can pretty much call me a down the line conservative.
Okay.
Conservative on national security issues and matters of liberty, and I'd say I'm socially conservative too. But my interest in freedom and liberty trumps my social values, I'd say.
Okay. Cool. All right. Andy is one of our moderates, and as some would say, he's kind of a little bit of a wild card because he'll sway back and forth from one side to the other.
I think I've been taking Eric's spot since.
Yes, we did have another fellow on the show who's not able to make it. He was our official wild card, but Andy's kind of filling in for him until he figures out what's going on. So he's got some left-leaning ideas, but he's also sometimes on the right side on a lot of issues too. So we'll kind of figure out where he's at depending on which hat he's wearing on which day. So let's talk to our final cast member, Nick. Nick Alex represents the left side of the political curve, and again, he's more moderate left versus a left-wing person. He was stuck on an airplane when we did some pre-recordings last week, but he's able to be with us today, so thanks for joining us, Nick. You want to give us a little tidbit about you?
Hey, no problem. Glad to be here. A little about me. I am pretty solid progressive, except for maybe a few economic issues. That's where I tend to moderate. So, but I'll see what kind of balance I can bring to the conversation.
Cool. Appreciate it. All right, guys. We're going to jump into the next part of the show, which is where I read a little bit of an article, and then that's what kind of sparks the topics. We're going to, in future episodes, do probably more than one, but because we tend to get a late start on some of these early ones, we're only going to do one shot tonight to keep it at a reasonable size. Guys, if you wouldn't mind muting yourselves to make it a little easier and reduce the feedback, that'd be cool. All right, thanks. So, let me bring up my article over here, and you'll see me kind of peering off into one of my other screens for a second, so bear with me on that. I don't quite have the fancy teleprompter thing worked out just yet. So, the title of the article is Just What is an Executive Action? It sounds like a really boring thing, but it's going to spark some interesting conversation, I'm pretty sure. This was posted on MSNBC probably a couple of days ago. The phrase of the week at the White House has been executive action. That's what the administration has termed the announcements the president has made about changes to government mortgage and student loan programs. The thing is, no one is quite sure what an executive action is. What's clear about these presidential moves is that they have not been executive orders. According to the C-SPAN glossary, an executive order is a presidential directive with the force of law that doesn't need congressional approval. And the White House clarifies that executive orders are binding because the chief executive, the president, has the power to command the executive branch. Now, the trusty C-SPAN glossary has no entry for executive action. And tonight, the White House clarified why, and it's because it's kind of a catch-all term. It just means something the executive branch does, the use of any number of tools in the executive branch's toolbox, said one administration official. Executive actions can include regulation, enforcement, statements of policy, and numerous other things, the official commented. So basically, it's anything the president does that doesn't necessarily modify a law. multiple officials have said that this is a continuation of the changes President Obama has called for in various departments throughout his presidency. It's just that this week the packaging is a little prettier. Now, the point of me bringing up this article, and you guys can go ahead and unmute yourselves whenever you want, is to kind of talk about the whole idea of not just an executive action, which doesn't seem to be very well defined, but an executive order. In other words, this is just talking about the idea that the president can kind of practically make a law. Now, I may be misinterpreting this myself because I'm no political expert, but I kind of want to just throw this out there. And Paul, I'm going to pick on you first just because of the whole liberty aspect I think that this has. So why don't you take a shot and give me your thoughts on political, well, I'm sorry, not political, but executive orders versus actions.
Well, actually, I would I'd start out by saying, number one, we didn't elect a king. You know, executive order, executive action, it's none of it's really geared towards what this country was founded for. I mean, when one man has the power to make something that has the force of law, we're essentially accepting a king, which has great potential for tyranny and abuse. And you know, we can say all day long that you know, it's never going to be abused in our society, but the reality is, you know, we see it abused on a daily basis, and none of it should be legal.
All right, guys. Anybody else have a comment on this?
Well, I'd have to heavily disagree with
I'll go
all
right
that.
now.
It's not a king because then his children would be able to like get the throne after him. So it's more of a dictatorship, really.
Go ahead, Nick.
That's semantics.
You know, I actually I'll play the other side of this because you know, we as an electorate, we hire someone to run the executive branch, and the idea that we are going to require an executive to get congressional approval for every management decision that that he has to make, or you know, in order to run the government, you know, executive branch, they're supposed to execute the laws of the land. You know, unfortunately, with the way laws are written, there has to be some sort of interpretation. We can't always wait for a judicial branch. If we want to have efficient government, and I know that, you know, most people on this planet or on this panel would want an efficient government, you know, there ultimately has to be some vested power in the presidency to make an executive action or an executive order. That's the idea of being in charge of an entire branch of government. You know, I can understand the concerns about abuse, but the idea that you know, you're not going to have an action taken by a president in order to move the country in a certain direction, I find that kind of hard to believe.
All right, Dana, do you have any comments on this?
I'm not sure I have enough information really to comment on this. I've been trying to do some research here. Interestingly, I wasn't searching Wikipedia, but a Google search brought up Wikipedia. Executive action is links directly to a term used by the Central Intelligence Agency to refer to their assassination operations. I don't think that's what we're talking about here.
There's some sort of irony there, I think.
Yeah, that was back in the 50s, by the way. It's not the present usage. No, but I'm inclined to generally say that, yeah, the president doesn't have the authority to act on his own without congressional oversight on very many issues. But at the same time, I know that if the roles were reversed, that that is, if a Republican was in the White House, that there are certain things that I would somewhat defend, specifically on national security issues. And I guess that I have defended. That's actually what I was trying to look up, is some of the Bush administration actions, if they were defined as executive orders or how they were specifically defined. But I know that I wouldn't in general, defend a couple of different actions that a president could take. I'm not sure that what the Obama administration is doing would fall under that. That is to say, I'm not sure that they are things that need to be kept off the books or done in a hurry, the kind of thing that might necessitate an executive order.
Well, I mean, obviously the president has control over the military, so I mean, those types of executive orders are.
The military, but also intelligence is what I'm thinking, and the legislature generally has oversight over intelligence agencies.
Okay. And part of this is actually because I'm looking to educate anybody who might be watching, and because I'm frankly ignorant about this, because when I read the article, I mean, I was skimming through a lot of different things, and maybe other topics might have been more interesting just at the core of them, but I don't quite understand what exactly the president's power is. I thought I did, but when I read this is something that makes me think a little bit like Paul does, and maybe I just don't have the right information, and I didn't spend a lot of time researching it, admittedly. How much power does the president have? I mean, what exactly can he do outside of things like military action or intelligence gathering directives, things like that? I mean, what kind of things can he do that are practically like laws? Is there something along those lines that he has the capability of doing, that he has the power to do? I don't know.
Well, that's the other thing I was looking into as far as the executive order generally has no basis in the Constitution. Which is sort of what I was getting at, that on its surface, then I would say, well, then it's unconstitutional, but I also know that there are things that I would generally defend. So perhaps Paul has another idea on this.
They may not be explicit in the Constitution, but they certainly have been have had judicial review. I mean, executive orders have been challenged a number of times in the courts, and sometimes they're held up, sometimes they're overturned. So it's not as if it's a extra constitutional power of the presidency. I mean, there's a reason why we have judicial review for things. Yes, it's not explicitly stated within the Constitution, but if it goes through the court system, there's a certain constitutionality implied that you can have executive orders. Again, I know we started talking about executive actions, and I don't know the semantics and how different they are, but I would say that there is some sort of credence lent to the argument that executive orders are legal when they've been challenged in court prior.
Though, honestly, we can follow the rule of law to the letter, and the current Constitution was written such that the federal government has been given blanket rights to do a lot of things that it shouldn't be involved in. But the intent of the Founding Fathers was not to give power to one person. That's what we were running from. We were running from England because of the fact that this power was abused. And it's not, the problem isn't a us or them problem. It's systemic. It's always going to exist where there is a government that has a little bit of power. I heard a phrase a few years ago: "Absolute power corrupts absolutely," and it applies. It really applies.
I think that was Spider-Man, Paul.
No, that was.
No, go ahead, Andy. Would you correct me?
I think that's Nietzsche, not
Oh.
Spider-Man. They're slightly different people.
Oh, sure. Spider-Man, Nietzsche, they're similar guys, right?
Nietzsche talked about the Spider-Men, right?
Right.
Oh, that's a super.
They wore the same outfit, I think, too, right?
Maybe that was
Sometimes.
Nostradamus talked about
Well,
him. He knew he was coming.
Yep.